So there's a lot of talk about community there, and there's a couple things. And the first, of course, is my continuing pitch for you guys to go join our LinkedIn group. We've done all of our design work in the open to date, and we continue to do that. So I think if you've followed our work to date, you can even follow our JIRA tickets and follow what exactly we're working on the open source branch as an example, so you can see what we're building today. The design work is posted on the blog by the engineers. So you can see through our thinking out as we think out loud on these things. And we'll continue a lot of that same work when we work on Corda Enterprise too. So this is very much an era of being a community, and we very much encourage you to participate in our community. And of course, we actually have a representative of the Hyperledger Foundation here. I'm not sure where she went, but that's another community we're also a member of. So we do participate outside of the Corda community because we know that this is a new technology area, and we're all trying to think through all these problems. So join us. If you have other questions, by the way, that we're not covering today, it'd be great. Throw them up on LinkedIn. I'll collect those, and we'll set up follow-up sessions. We actually have every 2 weeks, we do a webcast or a phone call. That's our architecture working group, and we go through different topics. So we'd love to hear what you want to talk about, and we'll get the engineers to spend some time preparing for that to answer your questions in detail in that form. So again, through the LinkedIn channel. So one of the things you'll remember is a lot of the technologies we worked with are those technologies that are existing, proven technologies in the enterprise. And that was a very intentional decision. One of the great byproducts of this is that we can bring in very strong enterprise partners who can start collaborating with us to help build out Corda, to integrate to that ecosystem and make Corda a stronger product. So among those, of course, is TIBCO. You probably would all know TIBCO is a very strong, historically enterprise player. So we've been working with Mike Kennedy and his team from TIBCO for various areas of collaboration. So Mike's going to talk about that today. I'm going to bring Mike up.
Well, good morning, everyone, and almost good afternoon. I feel like I'm at a disadvantage here. I might already have 3 strikes against me because I'm in between you and lunch. I don't have a British accent, and I'm not here to reveal any details of the iPhone 8. So I'm Mike Kennedy. I'm a senior person in engineering at TIBCO. I've served in a lot of leadership and architecture roles. I'm on the architecture board for the company, so one of my focuses is trying to figure out how does everything fit together. And this is Ian Yan. He's part of my team, and he's been leading up our efforts in blockchain. Okay.
On the slides first, right?
Yeah, well, I think, so are we supposed to hook up both or just the slides?
Yeah, okay, let's hook this now.
I think we can switch you over and go to the demo.
Okay, that's what I thought. We can leave them both hooked up.
Yeah.
Okay, so where's the clicker? So I should plug, TIBCO has traditionally been big into enterprise integration. Our new logo is Connected Intelligence. And I was supposed to mention that. Marketing said I had to, so now I'm done.
Sorry, I think that you should, this is not the slide.
Oop, it's the wrong computer.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can we switch back?
Yep.
Yeah.
Aha.
Yeah, that's it.
Connected Intelligence. And so just like Intel, if you share this with anyone else, we'll have to find you and kill you. No, I'm just kidding. TIBCO, how many people here have heard of TIBCO? Because most of my friends have never heard of it. See, look, that's great. You make me feel so happy. It stands for the Information Bus Company, and it's been around since the 80s. It's had many lives. Our most current life is about 3 years old. We were bought by Vista Equity Partners and actually taken private. And that's been a great thing for TIBCO because one of the challenges for TIBCO with being a public company was that you're just so controlled by the Wall Street and things like that. So what's cool about going private is we've really kind of reinvigorated the company, refocused. It's been the best time to work at TIBCO, in my opinion. So today we're going to talk about Blockchaininator. And you notice it has cryptocurrency and a ledger. So, but basically, one of the goals for this investigative project I've been leading is trying to make sure TIBCO understands what's going on in the blockchain community and the DLT community, figuring out how can we take existing TIBCO capabilities and augment blockchain applications, and also, looking for possibly new kinds of applications we might build ourselves. So today, I just want to go over a little background of what we've been working on over the last year, then talk about our latest POC project we've built, the approach and technology, and then we're actually going to demo it. So for the last several years, we all know blockchain, DLT have had a lot of buzz. Everyone's trying to figure out, what am I going to do with it? What does it mean to me? I know it's disruptive. And a lot of what's interesting, one of the reasons we were interested in working with Corda and R3 was almost every major bank uses TIBCO, and almost every major bank is interested in Corda. So we thought like that was a good place to start. Let's see, I already hit on those points. So the goals of and just so you know, blockchain-anator was my silly idea for an internal code name for the project, but Ian failed me, he didn't come up with a better name. So I know it's silly, that probably won't be the official name, but one of the things we wanted to do was just immerse ourselves in the community, learn as much as we could, look at how TIBCO can augment that, and like I said, look for ways that TIBCO might actually build new applications that integrate blockchain right into the software. And so, some of the questions we set out to answer, can blockchain applications operate at large scale? And what are the efficiency issues? What needs to be accelerated? And then another is, well, how do I interface my blockchain with my existing environment? And then another thing, and this seems to have been a real hot button for people, is if I want to pull in public cloud compute resources, can I do that? How do I run partially on-prem, partially on cloud? And then another question we set out to understand, and this may be less important for Corda, but some of our customers have approached us and we're interested in using some of our virtual supercomputing products to accelerate mining and other kinds of computationally intensive operations, because they already have investments in things like TIBCO Grid Server. And so that was another thing we sought out to investigate. Now with Corda, there really isn't the proof of work scenario as much, so that's not something we've done in this first phase of our project. So let me go over some of the things that we wanted to try to accomplish, and we've been working on this about 2 months. It was funny, like our CTO said, Mike, go do something, and here's 3 people in Houston. So Ian and I have been making frequent trips to Houston, and fortunately none of the members of our team had any issues with the hurricane, but it's been exciting. So we wanted to see, like, a lot of our customers said, is Corda or other frameworks really ready for prime time? Like if I wanted to run 10,000 nodes, does it start to fall over? So we wanted to be able to simulate that kind of thing. We also, orchestration, TIBCO has a lot of technology that can dynamically manage all your deployments. And so we investigated that. TIBCO is huge in analytics, so we're going to hopefully show later today, just some of our analytic capabilities, and there's so many things we could do, we're probably going to do more. And then finally, I know a lot of you probably heard about TIBCO with messaging, and so we're looking at, could TIBCO provide the messaging backbone of Corda as an option if you wanted it to go that way? So here is kind of the high-level picture of what we've tried to build in the last 2 months. We're planning on using TIBCO Silver Fabric to orchestrate the whole environment. And instead of, TIBCO Grid is, our grid computing tool. A lot of you probably, most of the banks around here use it. for running risk models and other financial simulations. And that's where I was talking about, like if I had, it's crazy, like some of the banks here have over 100,000 CPU cores deployed in a grid. And so when they were thinking about, accelerating mining, they were thinking, oh, exciting, I could do that. But that isn't the scenario for Corda. But what we can do with grid servers, we actually were creative. We turned around, and if we wanted to simulate like 20,000 users of Corda, we're using grid server to actually run that piece of software so that we can spin something up on Amazon, a very large environment, like a 5,000 node Corda network with thousands of clients on it potentially. And then finally, the product we're going to highlight today is TIBCO Log Logic. It's just one of our many analytic tools. And so the picture, and then finally, TIBCO FTL stands for TIBCO Faster Than Light. It's our current, I know, I didn't name that either, but but that's our current state-of-the-art messaging environment that's all peer-to-peer, which we thought would be a better fit for Corda. We're still working on whether that even is worth doing or makes sense. That part we're not going to demonstrate today because it turned out to be more than we could do in 2 months. But we are going to show today the ability, like if I was on-premise and I wanted to dynamically burst and spin up my Corda network on AWS and Azure, we can actually do that today. Okay, so I've already kind of hit on some of these points. I don't know, how many people have a hard time coming up with meaningful test data? I'm guessing we haven't answered that yet either, but that's something hard. Another thing we've talked about doing, we haven't done that yet with our POC is, I know there's been a lot of interest in simulating actual financial transactions, so we may build a version of this that handles Swift or some other kind of format of message just to see how hard it is. And TIBCO already does a lot of, financial transaction translation and processing, so that's a good fit for us. And like I said, we're utilizing TIBCO Silver Fabric to orchestrate, like all the pieces of software in that slide are all going to be installed, started, managed by Silver Fabric. And I don't know, a lot of you probably haven't heard of it. I was just going to mention, the cool thing about Silver Fabric is you can actually deploy to bare metal, you can start a Docker, you have tons of different options of how you do things. So that's why we wanted to highlight that kind of capability, because it's a one-stop shop for deployment and management and monitoring. Whereas like if you were to use open source for that, you have to use a lot of different technologies. Okay. And then I wanted to talk a little more about why we chose to highlight LogLogic in the demo. It's mostly the closest open source product to LogLogic is Splunk, and LogLogic can handle, it can drink from a fire hose. It can handle a huge amount of nodes pouring data in. So we thought that might be the first tool that we wanted to highlight. And the other thing that you can do with LogLogic is you can drink from that fire hose and pull the valuable data out that you might want to analyze in some other environment. So like I mentioned, we're not going to demonstrate messaging today, but we're in conversations with R3, and we hope to deliver that sometime this fall, as a demo. All right, so some of the things with this POC that we're planning on investigating are, how many people think the words burst to cloud are a lie? Like nothing spins up quickly on the cloud. So, we just want to see realistically, how fast can we pull things up, pull things down? I talked to one of our large customers last week, and he was saying, I love this Silver Fabric thing because I could use it in a DR situation. Like if my existing assets were inoperative, like a bomb goes off, with Fabric, I could replicate that all on Amazon as a temporary solution. So we're looking at things like that. I mentioned earlier, we haven't gotten to this point, but we want to try to break Corda or try to break things and see when we go to scale, what does it make it? What needs to be improved? Another really challenging thing, if any of you have worked on a lift and shift project, you know probably the biggest challenge you have is getting through your risk management department to allow you to use a public cloud resource. And then on top of that, you know, if you're really going to go between on-prem and multiple clouds, like we've had several customers tell us that they're mandated to use more than one cloud because they don't want to be locked to a certain cloud provider. You know, so getting all that networking working is actually pretty difficult. And then look at performance in different environments. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and switch to the other computer. Okay. So what we're showing here, it's called Skyway. It's part of our Silver Fabric tool set. And the idea with this is to kind of give you an easy dashboard to tell Silver Fabric to create different kinds of deployments. And so I think Ian already has it on in AWS, and you're going to start it up on Azure.
Yes, I think that currently we have the Corda nodes and application already deployed to the AWS. So just go to here, maybe just press the one. This is a template we defined for push the Corda nodes and application to Azure. So currently we are demo just the simple application, the Corda tutorial. Everybody knows that one. But in reality, in the Server Fabric, actually, as Mike mentioned, we can deploy thousands of nodes just by press one button. So now, if I press this one, you will see it will Server Fabric will start deploying the Corda nodes into Azure. Now, behind the scene, we're seeing in the Server Fabric, we have this called the Asset Manager. So this Asset Manager is behind the scenes doing the real working to dynamically allocate the resource in the cloud. So in this case, we created the virtual machine in the Azure, and then you see the two components we defined here. It's a Server Fabric Asset Manager for AWS and for Azure. So once that virtual machine created in the cloud, and also we deploy the Server Fabric engine in that virtual machine. So this Server Fabric engine is doing the real working. It's download the Corda application, like in this case, the Corda tutorial application, including all the dependency into the cloud, and then build the environment, set properly the environment for the Corda application. Like in this case, you can see in the highlight with the white row, it's already deployed in the AWS, but you see the one with the yellow one. That one is just to push the one Corda control nodes into the Azure. Now, in this template, we have that dependency we can specify, because in the Corda application, you want some nodes start up first. So that's the Corda control nodes start up. Now, once that one start up, so the rest of nodes can concurrently to deploy in the Azure. Now, the one thing I like to point out here is once these all nodes deploy in the Corda, they can talk all among themselves because they're all in the public domain. Currently, part of in the Azure, part of in the AWS. Now, this engine itself, the Server Fabric engine itself, it can manage the life cycle of the Corda application from startup, shutdown, and even manage the resource for that environment. For example, the Corda nodes application require more resource, so the Server Fabric engine can detect that one and then dynamically scale that environment for that Corda nodes, and also to monitor the Corda application in real time. If the Corda nodes, for whatever reason, the hardware failure is failed or is stopped, then the Server Fabric engine will relocate that resource either in the another engine space or somewhere else, just to make sure the system always up if you want it. So that's all the capability the Server Fabric engine can demonstrate that feature there. So now you can see the rest of the Corda control nodes in Azure already start up. So the rest of 3 nodes just concurrently started deploying in the Azure. So now since we already have the AWS nodes in the AWS in cloud. So I can go to the second part and we demonstrate the transaction. We can use the grid server to concurrently send multiple transactions to the Corda network application. So you can see more or less this is all provisioned to the Azure, almost finished. Now let's go to the next session, just the use the grid server. Now we send the 100 transactions through the grid server, and each time we send 10 transactions concurrently. So we just see that one, how you are seeing this will kick off the grid server to do all the transactions to the Corda application and nodes. If we go to this grid server here, so this is the monitor from grid server admin console. So you can see all these transactions just come in, then just continue process the request. So that's the part of the transaction from grid server. Now, after that, you can see, I think the third part is the analytical products. That's this log logic. This log logic basically accepts all the transaction or the log data from all different devices. So if you look at the dashboard over here, so you can generate almost any kind of log from the database or from even the flat file, log file. So in this case, we use the Corda use the log4j, and then we just hook the syslog, the one appendix to the log4j. So all the data, the log data in the Corda application will be routed to the log logic. So the data coming into the log logic, you can build up the model, just pass that data. Because the data come in as a flat data, it's raw data, we have to build the data model to translate that flat data into the structured data. So you can see here in this search, maybe just show that advanced search here. So this is the flat data, but since we already built the data model for here, so you can see some data that already translated to structured data like the transaction ID from the Corda application. And from there, you can build some dashboard, just to view the real diagram. So the dashboard is built by anything you are interested in. So just to show you how many transactions totally come out, how many transactions based on the each nodes. And then you can set some alert as well. So if we look at once again, the data model from here, so it's, as I mentioned here, it's because the data can come from different sources, you can do even system monitor, network activity. Once the data come in, you can build the data model, and then you do the cross-reference. The typical example is, say, if you know the transaction ID, you want to verify where this come from, so you can cross-reference which nodes participates, all based on this data, parser, you can get that kind of activity. So that's overall is the three parts we demonstrate. First is the server fabric to boost the Corda nodes application into the AWS and then the Azure. The second part, we use the grid server to do the concurrent transaction to the Corda application deployed in the cloud. The third part is analytical products, just consolidate all the data in the central place. You can monitor it, you can parse it, you can do cross-reference, and also you can set an alert if you want. So that's overall we have for this 2 months project.
Well, thanks, Ian. And I know that was a ton of stuff. We were trying to keep things short. If anyone's really interested in getting into more of the detail of what actually happened, there were things like Silver Fabric has a similar concept to like creating a Docker file, so we call that an enabler. So our team, had to figure out how to package Corda into that. And like Ian said, we modified Corda to write to syslog, but in general, it was pretty easy to get Corda to operate with these tools. And then just so you guys know, you can do most of this stuff through a GUI. I know that we were showing a command line for creating the load against the, grid server creating the load against the network, but really, that's just because the way grid server works is you can write any kind of client program you want. With Grid Server, you can write in almost any language you want. So, you know, we just wrote a command line program to drive the system.